Dear brothers, let's get after it this morning. We're going to talk about stress today and try to understand how for some reason stress has become this terrible word that we use nowadays to describe some kind of immense suffering, as if stress is this big bad monster looking to harm us in some capacity. I'm not really sure when the tide changed or when we began looking at stress as such a negative, but it's something which has harmed men now for far too long, and it needs to be addressed. So understand that stress falls on a curve. And so in fitness, when we talk about this, we look at muscles require stress so that they can, for a moment, decrease in function, and then the body adapts to that so that we are able to handle a bigger stress later on, right? It's the body getting stronger. In learning, we stress the mind so that when we take in new information, which we have to struggle with, so that we can help explain the world around us a little bit better, but we have to struggle against it to then be able to understand it. So imagine for a moment a world where there is no stress, carefree, nothing difficult, nothing hard. What does that even look like? Most people would think, oh, well, that's utopia. Everything is perfect and simple and nothing goes out of line and everything is beautiful. And like I said to you guys on episode 31 on meaningful suffering, utopias are only found in books, but not here on earth. Stress is a required part of the equation for us to succeed here. In order to gain some kind of higher result, be it physically, mentally, socially, spiritually, you have to undergo some kind of uncomfortability. You want to lose weight? You've got to get used to eating less. That can be stressful. You want to get stronger? You have to get to the gym and resistance train. That is stress. You want to improve your relationship with your kids? You have to get used to having hard conversations. That is stress. Most of you right now are thinking to yourselves, well, yeah, but there can be too much stress. And you know what? I agree. Like I said, it's a curve. Stress is a giant curve. And on the end of it can be too much stress. And that is where we will find legit suffering. Bad things happen when there's too much stress in your life. This is one of the reasons why in my business I'm so stringent with my clients on recovery, sleeping well, eating appropriately, and how they're treating their bodies. We don't want to go to a place where so much stress accumulates that we reach the fracture point. Injuries, disease, and a host of other issues that can transpire. But most men use that as an excuse when in reality, they're never actually stressing themselves that much. Men today have become so stress averse that they're not only softened physically, which we clearly notice, but mentally as well. To be strained in any way is avoided. And because of that, your mind and body don't have anything to adapt to. They have no reason to get better. Which, this reminds me, some of you have probably heard of this before, but there's an old story and it's called Damocles' Sword. So the king is sat down in his chair and he's given all the comforts of the world. Food, pleasure, servants, the best wine in the world, served hand and foot. And as he's sitting there, he looks up and there's a sword hanging directly over his head. And it's held on by just a horsehair. At any moment, that sword could come down and take his life. And all of these things he's enjoying are gone. And the concept of Damocles' sword has really become kind of a catch-all for impending doom. So, although it can be interpreted in many ways, the way that I like to look at it is that a life without stress, when your life lacks stress more, you are more likely to have your whole world crumble when for some reason that little thread gets cut. Someone dies, you lose your job, you're told you have to lose 50 pounds, or you might not have 10 more years left on your life. Whenever that real difficulty finds you, you are so fragile from avoiding the stresses of the world that you fall to pieces. The sword falls and you are impaled, unable to move and unable to fight back. You have no tools. You never built up your armor. You chose the easy road, which in the end becomes the hardest road of all because it costs you your life. There is nothing in this world that does not require some form of stress for you to grow. I tell people all the time in the training world, I want them to slowly develop calluses, not blisters. But once in a while, we do have to, have bouts of difficulty where that fluid gets under our skin. And I mean this more figuratively than literally, but the goal is that people slowly put themselves under stress. The body adapts to this and the body calluses. Then we build further off of that. But when people don't have those calluses developed, they've got soft hands, and then something hard happens. They've got to climb out of a cave. They've got to scratch and claw to try and survive. Their hands tear, they break apart, and they're unable to keep going. So you're going to hurt yourself if you're not preparing your body to handle the stresses of life. And we don't want that. So I find that far more men these days who fall under that low stress area, they don't have anything which drives them forward. Nothing which makes them better. They remain the status quo, which literally means they're always falling behind. Simple rule, if you aren't growing, you're dying. That's the entropy of life. For the modern man, we are not exposed to the same dangers as our fathers were, and our grandfathers were, and our great-grandfathers were. So I like to look at it this way. Because we don't have those same stresses in our lives, we have to actively seek stress in our lives. Strength training, getting on a diet plan, cold plunges, cutting alcohol, getting off social media, waking up earlier, reading difficult books or reading more books, having uncomfortable conversations with loved ones. We have to find things to put our bodies and minds against as resistance so that we can become better for it. In the absence of resistance, you cannot grow. Romans 5 says this, and I love this. I want you guys to pay attention. We triumph even in our troubles, knowing that trouble produces endurance. Endurance produces character, and character produces hope. A hope which never disappoints us. That's one of my favorite Bible verses, and one that I want you guys all to look up when you're done today. Romans 5, write it down and check on it every so often just to reread that. I love that verse. But what it implies is that we are always growing when we face difficulty, not merely staying the same. Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who's one of my favorite authors, has very, very well pointed this out. So he actually talks about the sword of Damocles, but then he says the step up from that is what we call the phoenix. So the phoenix is a resilient creature. We're always talking about we need to be resilient, right? The problem is that the phoenix is willing to fight and claw and scratch and try to survive, but once it dies, it only comes back the same way it was, unimproved. It's still robust, but it's not more robust than it was. It's just maintaining its status quo. But that is when Taleb talks about being anti-fragile. If you guys need a great book, go look up Anti-Fragile. And what anti-fragile is defined by is the hydra. When you cut off one of the hydra's heads, two pop up in its place. It is only improved when you put stress onto it. It increases its capacity. It's not averse to harm. It almost welcomes it because the more harm it takes on, the better it can be. Every stressor makes it stronger. All of you know that we have to face stress, but I would urge you, if you feel like you're avoiding stress or allowing yourself to soften, you have got to take strides today to put that difficulty into your life. You cannot grow as a man without it. Now, on the other end, for those of you that have too much stress in your life is piling up on you, you can't keep up, you need to start making choices on what your priorities are in life. We are human, right? We are mortal. We can only tolerate so much. And this is very few of you that should be listening to this part of the message because most of us are soft. I mean that kindly, but it's the truth. Very few of us are actually burning the candle on both ends effectively. And most of the time when we are burning the candle on both ends, it's because our priorities suck and we don't know how to cope with them. That's an episode in and of itself, which I'll address at a later date. But my encouragement to all of you that feel like you're burning it at both ends is to cast your cares at the foot of the cross and pray about your difficulties. Call your buddies, talk to your homies, be like, hey, I'm smoked. What do I do? My first line of thinking, I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to drop it at the cross. I'm going to call my buddies, be like, hey, I'm struggling. What do I do? But for most of you listening to this, for those of you that are avoiding stress, you're avoiding growth, you are avoiding the ability to protect your families, ignoring your role as a leader, spitting on the duty you've been given as a man of action, honor, and love. Get off your ass, seek out stress, and grow. That's all you need to start doing right now. God bless, be strong. Get after it, boys. Come on.